Ladies and gentlemen, I've been pulled out of my temporary retirement temporarily to bring you the latest escapades of Jeremy Dewitte. You remember Jeremy Dewitte, right? The man who is a convicted sex offender, who claimed to have been a captain in the army despite never serving in the armed forces. A man who has been repeatedly convicted of impersonating a police officer. Well, he was released from prison a couple of months ago, and it turns out he might not be done making the type of poor choices that put him there in the first place. When Jeremy accepted a plea deal for his most recent impersonation charges, he received a sentence of incarceration with a side of some of the most specific probation conditions I have ever seen. Conditions he agreed to in order to avoid the potential for some serious time in prison. As anticipated, Jeremy has struggled to keep his nose clean. On the YouTube channel of his paramour, Jeremy has appeared talking about a new channel he intended to produce content for, called Motor One's Moving. When I was made aware of this video, there were a few issues I identified, and I wrote them down, intending to save them for a rainy day. So, get your umbrellas ready, because it's about to get weird. 1. Jeremy isn't allowed to have any contact with any named victims or witnesses from any cases, other than his wife. There's a very good chance that Jen, his paramour, is a named victim or witness from any of Jeremy's cases, although I'm still waiting for that list from official sources. 2. Jeremy isn't allowed to engage in any activities related to Metro State, appear in public to be affiliated with Metro State, or publicly comment about Metro State. Jeremy, I know you have an alias or two. Have you considered the name Prometheus because you're playing with fire? See that patch on his hat? That's a flying wheel, a symbol that Jeremy regularly depicted on Metro State uniforms and vehicles. The name Motor One was his call sign when he ran Metro State. Motor One is moving is a quote from his own Metro State body cam footage. If he's not crossing that line, he's dangerously close to it. He has some defenses, sure. I imagine he'd argue that none of these things say Metro State, so they don't count. However, he has also made the argument that his Metro State uniforms and vehicles didn't say police, so dressing similarly to police and driving vehicles similar to police vehicles was an impersonation. But he's on probation because he lost that argument, or at least voluntarily surrendered it when he agreed to a plea deal. He's implying a connection to Metro State, and that might be good enough for a prosecutor and judge to become interested in this. But apparently, Jeremy's probation officer found a few other things, which Jeremy talks about here. I'll let him bring it up first, then I'll address it.
Just so you know, the reason why, and if you guys go back to my orders, which a lot of you f***s for some reason know more about my orders than I do.
We actually have less information about your orders than you do. All we have is the paperwork. You have the paperwork, you had an attorney who could have explained it to you, you had a judge who could have explained it to you, and now you have a probation officer to explain it to you. Somehow, it appears you're still getting it wrong.
The orders say that I had 60 days to get rid of all Metro State equipment. I had to stay in a hotel for 2 weeks, and I stayed at the Doubletree Hilton, so that you guys know, fresh out of prison, by the way, staying at a Hilton. But anyways, stayed there for 2 weeks because the officer that I currently have right now said I was in violation of my deal because one of my cars in the front yard was a Metro State car.
It appears he's trying to argue that he stayed at a hotel for 2 weeks because he was required to get rid of all Metro State equipment within 60 days of being released from prison, but the vehicle parked at his house was a marked Metro State vehicle. That doesn't make any sense because the 60 days, which as far as I can tell only applies to the closure of linked bank accounts to Metro State, the Metro State YouTube channel, and the Metro State website, and not the ownership of Metro State equipment, would have started at the time of his release. Unless he's referring to his pretrial release conditions filed on June 7, 2021 in Osceola County. Now, I see that he was required to divest himself of all Metro State holdings, but I'm not seeing 60 days. See, Jeremy, you do know more about your orders than I do. Or you misread them. Or, and hear me out here, instead of paying for a hotel for 2 weeks, you could have had someone else move the vehicle out of there. It's not like you needed to use it, because your license is suspended. I get the feeling that this would have been an easy probation violation to avoid, since the plea deal clearly stated Jeremy wasn't allowed to possess any Metro State property, i.e. equipment, vehicles, gear, etc. Now, it's a good thing the probation officer let him strip the vehicle of the Metro State markings and equipment.
So we ended up stripping the car, moving the car.
Okay, so that might stop you from violating the part of your probation that prohibits you from driving or riding in any vehicles resembling law enforcement or other government agencies, which we can conclude his vehicles looked like because he was convicted of impersonation. However, Jeremy, if you ever listed that vehicle on your Metro State Special Services Vehicle Protection Unit LLC taxes or registered it to that LLC, that could still be considered a Metro State vehicle that you needed to sell or divest yourself of. Either way. I mean, if your probation officer is cool with it, fine. It just seems like a poor decision to toe that line, considering you were charged and convicted of felonies because you couldn't figure out where that line was.
When I was away still, they came to my home 3 times, and they brought paperwork showing my phone calls, my visitation lists, who I visited with, and they provided all that information to Rania. And basically what they were trying to do was get Rania to say she wouldn't approve me to come to the home, because even though I own the house, she lives in the house, and under civil law, she would have to approve me living here as well, which of course she was doing all along. But they brought these visitation logs and the phone call logs to show her. They went into the Department of Corrections website using their IDs to print out page after page of phone calls and visitations, and brought those with them to bring to my wife.
All right, so this isn't exactly about probation violations, but I wanted to address it. Yes, when Department of Corrections employees print documents, I would hope they would need to use their IDs if those are government documents. I'm also guessing they want to give your wife the opportunity to make an informed decision, considering there was suspicion you committed domestic violence and confirmation that you were cheating on her. It's shocking that you don't understand what behaviors are or are not acceptable. Here, let me help. Cheating on your wife is not acceptable. That's a pretty popular opinion.
Which was confusing because those are private situations in prison.
No, they weren't. Your expectation of privacy in prison is very, very small.
What's even funnier is once I applied for trucking school, which I'm sure all you f***ers know since you posted me all over the internet, I had to get permission to go to the interview for the truck school. They knew I was going. They knew I was approved. They knew I applied. They knew I paid. And then they bring up the fact that they said that my license was suspended. And 2 jobs that I actually applied for as management were denied because they said that my license wasn't valid.
Yeah, I'm looking at page 3 of your plea deal, and it clearly says your license is suspended for 6 months after your release, which is, that's right now. Shocking that you weren't hired to do something that requires a valid license when you don't have one.
But then he was nitpicking things like the back seat in the Charger was hard plastic. Well, how does that make it a police car? Obviously the stickers and the lights totally get that. But when we start talking about a back seat that has nothing to do with one or the other, I think we're grasping at straws.
Okay, Jeremy, I want you to explain which non-law enforcement vehicles have plastic back seats. They're called prisoner transport seats for a reason.
The judge's order later on was told to me that I had 60 days actually to get rid of the cars and the Metro State equipment.
Actually, no. You were supposed to do it starting on June 7th, 2021. You had time. If you can't sell it, which I'm not surprised you couldn't considering your insane markups, you could give it away. That's both an option and a consequence of your actions.
In fact, the only account that I've ever had was the YouTube channel, which has been hacked, and I can't even access it anyways. I haven't been able to access it for over almost 2 years.
It's funny that you bring that up, because this brings us to the main event. Jeremy's warned for violating his probation. First of all, your last video on that channel appears to be from August 3rd, 2021, which is not 2 years ago. Second, you could have contacted YouTube and told them you lost access to your account, or you could have told your probation officer about this situation or filed any sort of legal paperwork to inform the court, who could then probably have put together a motion for you to send to YouTube to get that thing shut down. But apparently, you just let it sit there, unclosed in violation of the plea deal, and thought, this is the best option. Kind of looks like it wasn't. Even if Jeremy hadn't been able to access that channel for 2 years, that would have been before the plea deal was signed. Surely, it would have made sense to bring that up to the judge, right? Before putting your John Hancock on it. But he didn't.
But apparently they put out a warrant for me just recently.
What? He knew? And he hired Amir? Oh, hi, Amir. It's good to have you back on board. Unfortunately,
Osceola County Sheriff's Office was outside of Jeremy's door. There were about 40 units that were involved. So there were a few in front of Jeremy's home, on the side, and at the entrance, and on every street leading up to Jeremy's home in his subdivision. His neighbors were outside recording. Everyone was recording. It was a full-on circus. If you didn't know any better, you would think that Jeremy was holding someone hostage in there. I was also told that there was a helicopter, always a helicopter involved in a Jeremy Dewitte story. So you had, multiple units, you had a helicopter, and then some way, somehow, SWAT got involved. Before SWAT got on the phone with Jeremy, Osceola County Sheriff's Office had the house and pretty much the whole entranceway of the neighborhood surrounded. And there was one person that was on a bullhorn, megaphone, whatever the fuck you call it. And he was screaming,
Jeremy Dewitte! Jeremy Dewitte, I know you're in there. Come out with your hands up. We're not going anywhere. Jeremy DeWitt, come out. Jeremy DeWitt, we know you're in there.
And this went on and on for a while. I'm, again, not going to get into the legal parts of it, but it was not a 5-minute conversation. Freaking tank started rolling in. A SWAT tank started rolling in. I think they call it a bear. What is it called? A bear cat. Is it called a bear cat? I think it's called a bear cat.
But you're already aware of that, as well as probably this.
Jeremy, it looks pretty easy to delete an account. Why can't you just follow the law?
If I have to make a third Jeremy DeWitt song. On the other hand, I wouldn't say no to going back on Dr. Phil. But that's all I have for you today. Ladies and gentlemen, until the next time, be good, stay safe.